Such a great backdrop. Oh, we're live. Perfect. I'm excited to hear more about the barrel store, which we will get to. Hello, everybody. We're now live. We are starting our Mother Kelly's live tasting. Oh, with some waves from the folks from Wiper and True. Perfect. So I just want to say a quick hello and welcome to everybody. We are trying something new. So we used this last week with Alpha Delta. We're using it again this week. We've got a new platform called StreamYard that allows us to be not only on Instagram, but also on YouTube and Facebook at the same time. Wherever you're watching, you can submit your questions there. So if you've got questions for Michael and Will of Wiper and True, then please just comment wherever you're watching and those will come into us and we can ask them towards the end of the chat. But what I'm going to do briefly is just talk about what we're going to cover in the next 30 minutes, and then we'll get started. I never like to keep anyone waiting when it comes to beer. So what we are doing is we'll do some quick introductions first. So I'll introduce myself and then we'll have Michael and Will introduce themselves as well. Then we're going to do our tasting of Ghost Notes. Oh, the mirroring of the screen, I'm not used to it. You think I would be by now with all these Zoom things we've all done. But we're going to be tasting Ghost Notes, which is their mixed Ferm Pale Ale. Then we're going to talk about how the beer is brewed. As you'll see the lovely backdrop behind the guys, it is of their barrel store, which is where this beer comes from. So we'll talk a bit about the brewing process, the unique ingredients in here, the interesting mixed fermentation microorganisms we're using. So geeky questions are more than welcome. Then we're going to zoom out and talk a little bit more broadly about Wiper and True. What do you guys want to be known for? What are the styles that you brew? What can we look forward to from you in the future? And then take your questions as well. So as I said, questions are welcome on any platform. Just pop them down wherever you're watching, and those will come into us. So let's say a quick hello. My name's Nat. I'm a beer educator, beer sommelier, and advanced cicerone. So I teach people about beer for a living. And I no longer work at Mother Kelly's, but I'm here hosting the live chat as it's where I got my start in beer 5 years ago. So they have kindly had me back, and I get to have all these really fun conversations and geek out about different beers with brewers from across the UK. So I'm going to throw it over to Michael, and we'll introduce yourselves and a little bit about Wiper and True as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Michael. I'm one of the founders of Wiper and True. We're really excited to be here tonight and show a new beer off, and I'll come to talk about Wiper and True a bit later and the process. So, really nice to be here. Thank you guys.
Hello, I'm Will. I've been at Wiper and True 5 years nearly. I was a brewer and now heading up this new barrel store project and mixed fun stuff. So.
Very cool. So you're going to be our go-to guy for all of the details on how this beer has been brewed and all the interesting things going on inside it. All right, so are you ready to start the tasting, guys?
Sure.
So you just got your cans out of the fridge. I've had mine out for a few moments. So we can zoom in here and see what we are drinking. So we've got Ghost Notes, a mixed fermentation pale ale from Wiper and True. And I poured my sample out earlier. There was a bit of foam on top. It's dissipated now. But I just keep topping it up, and that's why the foam keeps dissipating. So it's got a lovely yellow color, a slight haze to it. And as I said, there was some foam on top that is just dissipated now. What we're going to do in our tasting is briefly talk through all aspects of our beer to make sure we can take it all in. So that means what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, and what it feels like. And this is how a beer professional would look at a beer. So I'm going to take you through all those steps and then bring in Michael and Will for their thoughts as well on these different aspects. So we've ticked the appearance box. So what we get to do next is then give the beer a swirl so we can check out its aroma. And if you read the notes on the back of the pack, it will tell us to expect some pineapple. It does not disappoint. There is loads of pineapple in the aroma of this beer. And for me, it's just like tinned pineapple, like you're making a fruit salad at home and you open that tin of pineapple and you can smell all of the sweetness and the fruit juice. It's really lovely. But I also get a kind of tropical hint, which I'm wondering, you'll have to tell me if that comes from the Brett or if it comes from the hops that are used, or perhaps both. And kind of a grassy note as well, perhaps from some of the dry hopping. So guys, what are your thoughts on the aroma? Anything I missed that you're picking up?
Not really, no. I'm really happy with the aroma. It's sort of, we write briefs and we're quite strict about what we want to achieve from a beer before we make them, and I think we're both really happy with what we got from this. I think one of the things I like about it is that kind of tinned pineapple. I really like it when you get almost synthetic flavors of very natural ingredients. So it tastes almost like that kind of slightly sweetened pineapple, which I've no idea where that comes from because we only use the best hops and natural yeast and barley stuff. So I always find that quite interesting when that happens.
And maybe it is just our experience. So when we detect aromas, they go to the emotion and memory centers of the brain. So maybe it's just that for us, tinned pineapple is much more memorable than cutting into perhaps what we get here in the UK, which is often maybe an underripe pineapple that's not as sweet and juicy as if you were to have one in Hawaii. So kind of having that that memory of having tinned pineapple and that sweetness, maybe that's just what we're connecting to. But yeah, it's really, really lovely, that pineapple note. So yeah, let's move on to tasting the beer and see what we get on the palate. And so again, for me, and as you can see with the guys' beers, there's a lot more head on top of the beer. So they've done a better pour than I have. But for me on the palate, again, mostly similar to the aroma. Definitely lots of pineapple. I'm kind of getting a little bit of that Brett funk, but very, very light. For me, there's just kind of this depth to it, an extra dimension of something a little bit earthy or funky, but not overwhelming in any way. And there's also still that grassy note there, but there's something to me that I feel there's like almost an acidity, but I know that Brett doesn't produce acid. So I'm interested if I'm just maybe making the mental association with pineapple, that I would expect there to be that little bit of acidity that I know is in fruit, or if there is a bit of acidity in the beer, or a slightly lower pH for some reason. So what are you guys getting for the taste, and is any of that something that you're picking up too?
Yeah, no, I think pretty on it there. Yeah. Happy with the pineapple follows through from the aroma, comes through really well. And yeah, I think the grassy, more like tropical things we're getting from the hop, and a lot of that pineapple notes from the Brett actually.
Interesting.
From a pH point of view, it was a pretty standard finishing pH.
Okay.
4.2 sort of region. So
yeah, so it wouldn't be too tart then in that sense. It would have to be below 3.9 or lower for it to be tart.
Thing from the flavors.
Yeah, we've certainly noticed that as well. It's a perception that we've found as well.
Yeah.
Even though the data doesn't necessarily indicate it.
Yeah, maybe it is just this mental image of pineapple that we're carrying through. But I also love the lightness of the body as well. So when we're talking about that final step, the texture of the beer, it's really light, it's really spritzy. For a warm day like today, this is absolutely perfect to kind of have this pineapple spritz flavor almost for this beer.
Yeah, I think that dryness exaggerates that sort of tartness as well.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I noted that as well, the dry finish, which is natural coming from Brett, as it is just going to work away and use up whatever sugars it has available. So, okay, are we ready to start kind of geeking out about where all these flavors come from?
Sure.
So the beer is advertised as a mixed fermentation pale ale, and the mix of microorganisms that are used are Kveik, if I'm saying it correctly. I hope I finally gotten it right. I know it's a tough one to say. And Brettanomyces, which are two very unique yeast strains. So let's focus in on those two first. Tell me a little bit about those two yeast strains, how they differ for anyone who hasn't heard of Kveik or Brett, and then why you chose these ones in particular.
So I'll pick up on the first one, you said it right week, Renaud. So for us, this was a really interesting, fairly new release into the market that stems back from a Norwegian brewery. And it's one of the unique things about this yeast is that you can ferment it at really high temperatures without it getting very upset and kicking off a load of nasty flavors. So it's kind of, that's one crucial feature. The other thing is that it's kind of complementing and expressing hop characteristics as well, and adding a bit of citrus flavor, just backing up the kind of the hop flavors that a lot of modern beers want in them. So from the flavor perspective, that was very interesting to us. The second part is that the Brettanomyces that we're pitching it with likes to ferment at a higher temperature. So most traditional British breweries will use, if we were to allow them to ferment at the temperature of the Brettanomyces, then they would pick up all these nasty flavors like plastic, so it was a really useful use to bring in to pair with the flexibility of temperatures we use.
Yeah, it's a great point that Brett needs different brewing environment than a traditional yeast would use, Saccharomyces, but Kveik uses its own unique brewing environment, which is, as you said, it ferments at much higher temperatures than normal and way faster than normal too. So this is a nice way to bring the best out of the Brett by using the brewing environment or the fermentation conditions that the Kvike needs as well. So how do the two of them work together? In the sense that Brett typically takes a lot longer to ferment to get its funky flavors, whereas Kvike is a really quick fermenter. So how did you bring out the best of both yeast? Is it just having that high temperature fermentation to get started?
So with this beer, there's different ways to do sort of mixed fermentations. You can do like a co-pitch where you pitch both at the same time right at the start and let them just sort of battle it out, or you can delay the pitch of one or the other for whatever reason. So for this one, we let the pitch the pipe first at a nice high temperature that it likes, let it rip through, and then delayed the Brett pitch, bring the temperature down a little bit. And then get the Brett in at its sort of happy temperature, which is a few degrees lower.
Okay.
When we ferment a standard South Brett. And that's meant that it sort of delays the development a little bit. It also does stress the Brett out a bit, which can encourage it to give out some of the flavours that we're looking for, the stress of the esters, mess around with some of the compounds, flirty.
Big stress.
Yeah.
Like the stress that we need to bring the best out of it. Yeah, exactly. If we were to use these temperatures for a normal yeast strain, as you said, we'd get some unpleasant flavors like that plastic that you mentioned and kind of these really solventy aromas, but we don't get that from the Brett. And how long has the Brett been with the beer? As I know, it can take a while. So initially when Brett is young, you typically get those fruity flavors like the pineapple that you mentioned, and then the funky flavors don't tend to come about until a little bit longer. So are you expecting those flavors to appear at some point in this particular beer?
Yeah, I am expecting them at some point. This is our first batch of this, so one of the things with Brett, there's as many Brett strains, maybe more as there are sort of clean strains. So and a lot less known about them because they haven't been used for very long. So we're learning as we go, and when you're using two different strains together, how they interact is a big unknown, a big learning curve. So we'll see what sort of timescale we work on. But it's been about a month and a half, something like that. Yeah, 6 weeks. And yeah, it's definitely developing, but not at an alarming rate, which I'm happy with. So it's got some longevity.
Yeah, right. It's going to be. Oh, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
I think something that's really important to us about these beers, and the design, the years we spent thinking about them, is that we make a really kind of accessible mixed fermentation beer that's not really Brett Brettanomyces heavy, where it's all really intense flavors that are not always easy to step into. So that there's a degree of subtlety to it, and it's a thing that builds over time. But really, that it's a balancing feature in a beer, and we believe that's to the extent that we want people to pick up a can, not knowing anything about mixed fermentation or never heard the word Brett before, and be able to enjoy the beer without thinking about it, and then know they know there's something slightly unique about the flavour, but it's just something that fits naturally into a great beer, rather than this is a Brett beer that we want to make taste Bretty. Because as Will said, there's so many strains and there's so many different facets of it and so many different ways that it can manifest that our job is to try and just bring that into a really good beer at the end of it all, rather than just see what we can do with a new yeast.
It's a great point too. Not only is it fun for you as the brewer to get to experiment and figure out, okay, how's this going to change over time? How's this one strain of Brett going to not only act on its own, but interact with the different ingredients, the different microorganisms you're using. But then for the consumer too, to be like, okay, I know pale ales from these guys. What does mixed ferm mean? Let me give it a go and see what new flavors I can experience. And as you said, since the Brett is not the only focus of the flavor of this beer, let's talk a bit about the hops. So you've got 5 hops in there. So you have Euconaut, Simcoe, Laurel, Citra, and Mosaic. Quite a lineup. Why these ones in particular? Was it to get a certain aroma that you thought would interact well with the Kvike yeast, or these were just hops that you like? What was the reasoning behind these ones?
Yeah, I think we were trying to get a good broad spectrum of hop flavor. They're all pretty fruit forward. Maybe the Laurel has a bit more of a earthy fruit thing, but to give the beer that familiar out, Familiarity.
Teamwork, I love it.
To what people are expecting from pale ales and big beers these days. To make the beer that more accessible, sort of an aroma they expect, and then try and get the Brettanomyces and the different yeast strains to play in with that and become even more complex.
I think it's a lot of these beers that we get to try on the market are really traditional Belgian beers that are amazing in so many ways. We thought it'd be fun to try and play with some kind of modern hops that have those huge tropical fruit notes and citrus going on, rather than pairing it with just the yeast focus on malt beers. So yeah, I think that was quite an interesting thing for us to try and explore.
Yeah, as you said, it's giving your customers one thing that they expect. So keeping one thing constant, which is these big hop flavors that they're used to from your beers, and then introducing something new so that you're not totally introducing them to flavors they're not aware of, but saying, okay, you like these hop flavors now, see what happens when we mix it with this interesting yeast strain, and get to understand these get more familiar with these mixed fermentation flavors. So let's talk a little bit about how it's brewed, because you don't brew this beer where you normally brew your clean beers, your pale ales, IPAs, your milk stout that I think I know you best for and many people know you for. So you are filming in your barrel store, which is where you make this beer and your other mixed ferm beers. So what makes the process different? Tell us a bit more about what goes on at the barrel store and how that's different from what's happening at the regular brewery.
So we still do all work production at the main brewery. So sort of the beer starts its life down at York Street Brewery, where all our beers do. But instead of transferring it to a FE down there, we put it into 1,000-litre containers and then drive them up to this new premises, which is just up the road.
They're like massive wine box.
Yeah, huge bags and boxes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Nice. And then up here, we then run into the FE option 8, which as we normally would. But having that separation allows us to play with whatever yeast strains we want without any risk of cross-contamination and those sorts of things that you might worry about with these strains in there.
Yep. And then has this beer spent any time in barrels, or it's only been in stainless for its fermentation?
Just in stainless, yes. So despite the name, the barrel store, it's called it for an obvious reason, but not all the beers we're making here have barrel residence. So,
and I think that's a good thing for people to know as well, that we can make mixed fermentation beers just in stainless. It's more about the microorganisms. You can introduce them into a stainless steel vessel. They don't have to come from living in the wood that you've inoculated, like in the barrels behind you. So we can take different approaches and you get different outcomes. So what is going on behind you? What are some of the things in those barrels there?
These ones we have. You talked about our milk stout.
Yeah.
Every now and again, we release a double strength version of milkshake, which is called hard shake. And these are full of hard shake, so it's a probably 11% ABV version of milkshake now. But
ooh, dangerous, my goodness.
In various types of bourbon barrel. That bourbon vanilla kind of oakiness complements it so well, which we're hoping to release before Christmas. And
very nice.
And these ones are various different barrels. So you see the Cotswold Distilling Company here. These guys are a whiskey maker just up the road, but they make gin as well. And they gave us some of their previous use gin barrels, which one of the best things that we've brought out of them is a collaboration with Brasserie Montsaleve from France, where we did a kind of inspired saison. But it's now these stack is full of an unnamed style of beer, which is going to be a kind of 11-12% pale ale that's highly carbonated, that it's kind of takes some cues from champagne and celebratory moments. We're just kind of waiting for the right time to bring that out. Maybe now is not a very celebratory time, I don't know. And then we've got various other things going each way, and they decide. One thing that, again, we're hoping to bring out before Christmas is down this way, which is we have a Christmas beer called Plum Pudding, and we've got 4 previous cognac barrels that we're aging the Plum Pudding in that we brewed earlier this year to be ready for Christmas.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Okay, so let's finish up our conversation about ghost notes then with one last question on that, and then we will zoom out a bit more broadly, as clearly you guys are doing a lot more than just this one beer. So the name Ghost Notes, what's the story behind it? Where does that come from?
Ghost notes a music reference. It's a term that it's rhythmic value, but it has no discernible pitch. So it basically adds this quality to the song that's quite mystical. It's there without being there, and it adds a vibe to it without being very difficult to describe. And so we thought that was quite a nice analogy for the way we're brewing here, where again, going back to that thing, we want to make really balanced beers that are very accessible, not just people who are really into natural wines or really into prep beers, but something that anyone can pick up. And so we wanted to have this sort of depth of flavour and complexity without it being really obviously there. There's one thing that stands out. So it was all about this kind of how we get balance and flavour in a subtle and kind of slightly mysterious way.
Very nice, very well thought out. I like that. It's sort of this mysterious thing, there's this extra element to it, but it doesn't need to be too obvious, and maybe you don't even need to know what it is, but that there's that depth, that's something interesting about the beer, that if you're keen, you can turn the can around and read all the details about what yeast is in there, what hops are in there. But if not, you're just like, something interesting is going on there. Let me continue enjoying it after you pick out the pineapple and all these other interesting characteristics. Okay, cool. Any last things you want to share about Ghost Notes before I broaden us out to talk more about a bit of the history of Wiper and True, some of the other styles that you brew? I don't want to take away from Will. You run the barrel store. I want to make sure if you've got any other stories you want to share, any other comments.
I think we've pretty much covered.
I think one thing might just be around the strain of Brett that we used.
Yeah, go for it.
We actually got this from a Canadian lab specialising in Brett and beer. And we went to see the guy who runs it to give a talk on mixed fermentation, and it was back in 2017 or something. And we were really impressed, and he through his talk he kind of challenged us to think about what we would want to do with this beer if we were to make it. And so it was really nice to, once we got this place set up earlier this year, to kind of complete that circle and go back to him and buy some of the strains from him. They're really making sort of progressive focus on this kind of strain and being a lot of study into it, which is quite an exciting thing. And just as opposed to a bit of the background on Brettanomyces, it's largely in the wider industry only really talked about as something you need to get rid of and something that you need to protect against. So it's really exciting that people are kind of taking this to the next step of really studying it and putting resource and investment into it as a thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you also have a mixed Ferm IPA and double IPA coming out. Is that right? Are they using the same strain of Brett, or you're experimenting with different ones there?
They are using the same strain. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're really trying to learn everything we can about this strain and how it behaves under different conditions, different situations. So it's one that they've worked on to work well in hop-driven beers and work well as a co-pitch. So yeah. Really figure it out.
Yeah, right. You got to use it in all different kinds of environments to figure out how it's going to work, what flavors it can reliably contribute. So yeah, it sounds like you got your work cut out for you, Will. So let's go back to the beginning of Wiper and True. If you just want to tell me, Michael, a little bit about when you guys got started, sort of what some of the beers you were brewing back then, or what some of your core range is now, if it is some of the same beers from when you first got started, and then tell us how you got up to now, in the sense that clearly you're experimenting with all kinds of things, but you do have this core range of beers that you've built your brand on. So tell us a bit about those.
Yeah, so I started cider making actually, just as a hobby with friends, and that kept on building, and you kind of you get fixated, you get obsessed with making things and making foods. That's then that progression, just like a lot of breweries that started up around 2012. It's in the story that became transitioned into a commercial venture. And at the time we launched, we didn't have a full range, we kind of had a motto of not having a full range. And every beer was different, everything was labeled. And I remember standing up and doing kind of tastings and beer sessions and saying, there's no such thing as a perfect beer. we will just keep experimenting and trying new things. And as the company's developed, that's sort of flipped around quite a lot, and we started to become obsessed with the opposite. And now I think there is a perfect, or at least a perfect version of the beer that we can make, and that progression happened over the years to have a whole range now that we're really proud of. Alongside Pale Ale and our focus over the last few years has really been about trying to make them amazing, whilst keeping up the variety with seasonal beers that we are coming back to. But again, we're doing much less. This is a one-off beer that we're releasing to the market, and each year we're returning some things and trying to refine them. So it's been a bit of a journey for us, and now you'll see much more of our kind of story through that in one house. And I think that transition into this, which again we want to do slightly different in the way that breweries are approaching the experimenting, and we don't. Our ambition for this is to be part of our core range and part of our offering one-off experiments that we play with. And this is we tried it, so it's been gone. This is something that we want to really become experts use and be able to deliver that kind of balance between something that is consistent and the basic is familiar, but also that something that is experimentation development at the time. So it's a really good kind of balancing act repeatable, but also engaging enough and changing enough quickly and keeping them at a time.
Yeah, right. It sounds like you're setting yourselves quite the challenge of having, to repeat these beers and really fine tune them. And it is something I think many people say about craft breweries when they first get started. Often brewers will tend to experiment because it's really difficult to make the same beer and have that same consistency time and time again. So now that you've been able to do that with your core range, then you can start to learn all of these different microbes that you're using and figure out ways to make that quality repeatable and that keep that consistent as well, which sounds like quite a fun challenge for beer geeks and for brewers. This may be, go ahead.
We don't yet feel that we've still got work to do on that.
Oh yes, of course, I understand. This is all new, but yeah, it's nice to know like where the direction is, where you're going with the plans. This may be too tough a question to answer, but do you have any favorite beers of yours? Maybe a favorite brew day or a favorite beer style that you've brewed that you're really pleased with and proud of?
For me, it's often, I mean, when I get asked this question, it's often like the last thing we make. But, we made a mixed fermentation saison for Bristol Craft Beer Festival, which just happened last weekend, and to celebrate the festival. And I think it's a brilliant beer that we made, and I could say that more easily because Will was totally responsible for it and the recipe and the production. So yeah, I thought it was one of the best things we've ever made.
Oh, I wish I could have tried it. I love saisons and I love mixed fermentation saison because I do think saisons are interesting because they've got the hops, they've got the yeast character, they've got interesting grains often, so they really bring everything to the table. And then yeah, when you start adding in mixed fermentation, it adds even more dimension to it. Will, you just got loads of compliments on your beer, but do you have any beers that you've brewed or from the brewery that you're particularly fond of?
Yeah. Again, I suppose it's only recent stuff in memory, but I think the double IPA that's come out pretty recently is probably even one of the most interesting. There's just so much going on, and every time I drink it, I get something different from it. It depends sort of what state of mind you're in, and it's a really, really cool beer.
Nice. Well, I'll give everyone one last reminder if they have any questions to please pop them in the chat. And Michael, I'm going to bring up something that we talked about earlier, which was about your commitment to sustainability. And it was something that I wasn't particularly aware of, but I see that you write on your can some of your, the sustainability things that are important to the business, the idea of using 100% renewable energy, the beer being carbon neutral. So it's big to declare something like this on your packaging and to show what your intentions are. So do you want to tell us a little bit about why sustainability is important to you and sort of where you're at in your sustainability process for the brewery?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, firstly, to say from the beginning, we're at the very start of this process rather than anywhere near where we'd like to be with it. So, For us, it stems from the kind of the responsibility that we have to make sure we're producing in an environmentally sound way. And that's started with the kind of quick wins and the simplest things to do. So we've been using renewable energy from the beginning. And when we moved to cans, we were able to start working with new producers to use cornstarch labels rather than plastic labels. We're taking off boxes without plastic, and we've got lots of small things we're taking off. But we have a huge journey to go on with that. And actually, just to point out, we're not carbon neutral. We're nowhere near that yet. That's a big project for us, but it is something we aim to be. And we've appointed a sustainability manager to help us guide this process and keep us on the right track with it. I think the next biggest step is that we need to build a brewery, and that will be an opportunity to review our process for all our equipment and everything from efficiency to direct sourcing to waste and stuff. So it's kind of we're at the start of a project rather than in a phase we've not been it, but it's
Yeah, I think it's just quite cool that you're, noting. A lot of people don't realize all of the raw materials that are required in brewing, the amount of energy that's required in brewing, the amount of water that's used. Sometimes in some breweries, depending on how well they do with their water usage, it can be 10 pints worth of water to make 1 pint worth of beer. So things like that, thinking about how we ship the beer, cans are definitely much more sustainable, better for the environment than glass bottles in terms of weight and things like that. And I haven't really seen that many UK breweries declaring that, like you said, you're at the beginning of the process, but this is important to the brewery and to the business, and it's something you want to work on. So I think it's quite cool that you've made that commitment and that, you're willing to speak to other people about it, what you're doing and what goals you're working towards. I'm just checking. We did have a question, but it was about the Mixed Ferm Double IPA. So essentially asking what was coming from that style. So other people are excited about the next Mixed Ferm beers that you have coming out, and then comments about it being great to take a deep dive into the brewing process. So thank you both for sharing more on that. In terms of what we can look forward to from you guys, any particular beers you want to shout out? I know you've mentioned quite a few. So the Hard Shake behind you, that will come out later in the year. The champagne beer, which sounds really interesting to me. Or even just of your next Mixed Ferm beers, anything you want to tell people to keep an eye out for as we wrap up our chat?
I think for me, something that will be joining our core range in November is a Munich Helles Lager, and
that's exciting.
We've done a batch already. So we have a German head brewer who's a German master brewer who came over and took one look at our kit and was like, "I'm not making a lager on this." And eventually, during lockdown, we squeezed one out of him, and even he was happy with it. And we think we struck a really nice balance between that kind of those things that I love about beer that become quite contradictory when you start talking about them being full-bodied and crisp at the same time, and refreshing but satisfying, and all this kind of thing that to us the lager should be. So we'll be releasing that in early November, and that after a successful first launch, and that will be our core range from then on. So check out York Street Helles.
Very cool. That sounds really interesting. Will, anything from you?
In the brewing calendar coming up, probably pretty excited about. We're actually going to be making Ghost Notes batch 3 in 2 weeks' time. So just to keep refining this beer and trying to get it as good as we can.
So clearly it's going down well, which is really good to hear. Okay, there we go. Let's get the can and the photo for everyone to see. I do believe, did you guys say this batch is sold out now? Is that right? So everyone's got to wait for batch 3 if they do want to try it, if they haven't gotten their hands on any yet.
I'm getting cans week after next, and then batch 3 will be going into that.
Okay, perfect. Well, I will say thank you guys so much for your time, for letting us know more about Wiper and True more broadly, about the Barrel Store, about this beer in particular, Ghost Notes, which I'm excited to get to drink the rest of now. So to keep up with the guys at Wiper and True, they are at Wiper and True on Instagram and Twitter. So you can keep up with all the latest releases that are going to be coming out soon. I'm Beer With Nat. And you can keep up with Mother Kelly's at mother_Kelly's on Instagram and Twitter, and then each site has its own Facebook page. The Bethnal Green and Stratford bars are now reopen, and the Stoke Newington bottle shop is open as well. So there's plenty of Wiper and True and some Wiper and True mixed packs as well if you want to give a couple of their different styles a go. So either head down to the bars of the bottle shop or shop.motherkellys.co.uk and you can stock up on some more there. And yeah, hopefully give this beer a go or wait for batch 3 whenever it comes out soon, because it's really tasty. So thank you again, guys. It's been so lovely to chat with you, and have a great evening.
Can I just say thank you to...
Yeah, no, come on back.
I just want to say thank you to you, Nat, for hosting this and showcasing the beer of ours, and also to Mother Kelly's. We've always been so proud to be stocked in there. It's such an amazing place, and yeah, really thank you for setting this up for us.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it, guys. Cheers.